Hi, everyone. My name is Ali Blum. I'm a conversion copywriter and onboarding consultant. I help software businesses who want to help their new customers get started, be successful, and ideally upgrade to a paying account, continue using their product, help customers see value from your product over the lifetime of working with you. Today, we're going to talk about how we can build an onboarding strategy that is using email to help both our product champions, the people who come to our tool, they're excited to solve their problems, they can't wait to dig in, and the people who are less excited, the people who are invited to join, the people who maybe want to solve the problem, maybe not, people who may have a little bit more of a complicated reaction when they see that first invitation to join their colleague in your product. So before we get too far into it, let us begin by talking about whether or not this is a session worth your time and energy. There's over 60 sessions in the Product-Led Growth Summit, which is incredible. This is a good one for you if you are already looking at activation, if you're already attending some of the great talks on how to identify those product qualified leads, what metrics might constitute a customer success milestone. Once you have that data on what actions you might want your new users to complete, you can use what you're learning in this presentation to start to write some of those emails to actually help people move forward and complete those actions. We're also going to focus mostly on what it's like when you have a team using your tool. When there's more than one person, how do you customize that experience based not only on their demographic, their job title, their persona, you might be more familiar with that term, but their status in their company, their functional role, how they're actually going to pay for it, if that's who will do that. If you are someone who has a single user product, we will talk a little bit about how you can use research to write emails, but the goal is really customizing that experience for those two user groups in team-based products. You should also have the right mindset. You should know that email is something worth considering, something that can be really powerful for working to overcome some of the barriers your new customers may have, and open to maybe learning some things about conversion copywriting that maybe you haven't tried before. By the end of this talk, you will have learned what qualitative data you should be looking for and how you can use it to improve onboarding. Like I said, there are a ton of great talks about quantitative analysis. We won't be talking too much about that here. We'll get into what's called voice of customer data pretty deep. We're going to review the primary and secondary goal of an onboarding email, what the visible and hidden work people are going to do when they're learning a new product, how your product champion and your antagonist approach learning your product, what things they may be considering, what you need to know when you're starting to personalize the messaging, my own go-to roadmap for getting inside people's heads and understanding what objections they're bringing to you and how we can overcome those objections, and then how to turn all of that user research into actual emails. So there will be a few examples with mini teardown. They're fictional examples. And at the very end, I'm going to also share a link to a free 4-part email course I offer on my site that goes a little bit deeper into what you may want to put in those emails. Before I go too much further, I also want to mention that this presentation is shared in a tool called Mural. I'm hopeful, we'll see if the logistics make it possible, that there will be a link to the Mural in the follow-up email for this presentation. If there's not, I've also included a bit.ly link at the end, a shortened version so you don't have to copy out a long one, that will give you access to the Mural for as long as you would like to see it. So you can come back, check out the links, and refresh your memory on anything. So with that, let's get into our first question of the day. Why even bother with onboarding emails? Who needs them? Email's dead, right? Or maybe you feel that maybe you're excited about it. The main reason why I like to say that we need to send onboarding emails is because they're helping people get started. Now, if you're coming to this presentation with a mindset of, oh, I get a lot of emails, or email bothers people, I don't want to bother their inbox, keep in mind that there are many, many people who sign up for your tool and want extra help. They need more than just being dumped into a product and left to fend for themselves. Yes, there are support articles. I'm sure they can go ahead and Google if they have a logistical problem. there's a little bit more that goes into learning a new product than the tool itself. So your best prospects, your best customers who really want to get started, many of them, not all, but many of them will be excited to see the right information in their inbox from you if it helps them. So you may have seen a framework for what should go into an onboarding email before. This is a very great model. It's BJ Fogg's behavioral model. And the general theory, if you're not terribly familiar with it, is that if you want a behavior to happen, you need a motivation. Someone has to care about completing an action. They need a trigger. There has to be something that causes them to actually take an action, and the ability. It needs to be clear what needs to happen. They have to actually be able to do it. An onboarding email should have all of these things. Your trigger, the email itself is a trigger when it shows up in somebody's inbox. There's also trigger-based email. So they will do something, and depending on how well they are interacting with your product, they may be getting certain emails rather than certain other emails. They also are going to need the motivation, and this is a great way for onboarding emails to help people find that motivation, because so many of us give up on trying to solve our problems when the going gets a little tough, or we have to think a little harder than we want to. And lastly, there's the ability. Now, this is something that may find its way into an onboarding email in the form of a how-to guide or something you can copy and paste, or link to a support article. We'll go into the many different ways that giving someone the ability to complete an action can happen in email in a little bit. But first, I want to do a quick thought experiment. So what is the primary purpose of an onboarding email, if you had to guess? And what is the secondary purpose? And there could be a tertiary purpose, and on and on and on. But if you had to think about it, I want you to take a moment, think what it might be. Now, there are many different opinions on this, and there are many different hypotheses, and honestly, there's no right answer. But as we go forward and continue talking about how we're going to help people who may or may not be excited about our product, I want to challenge what might be conventional wisdom and say that motivation is the primary goal. Now, that nudge, that pushing people back into your product, make sure you get that engagement, move them in, that's a very big reason why we send onboarding emails. But when you're bringing people in who are coming with so much objection to getting started, more than just a nudge back to the product, you want to help foster within them that motivation to see why their product could help them. Secondarily, we can actually help people use the product. Now, why do we care so much about motivation? Well, the way that I like to categorize it is that there is a lot of what is called hidden work. Now, hidden work is what's happening when people are learning to use a product that is different from the work that they might expect. It's different from the work that is assumed. No one expects that they're going to learn how to use your product the first try. Yes, it should be intuitive. Yes, it should make sense. Yes, absolutely. When people come into your tool and if it's a confusing mess, that's not what we want. That's visible work too. But this kind of hidden work, especially when you have teams of people who all have to get on board, this hidden work is stuff that happens outside of the product. So to give you a few examples, if you are loading data, okay, so maybe you have to find a file and you upload it. Maybe it takes you a little bit of time to track the file down and you have to find the right place to put it. This is visible work. You know, if you're storing data in a product, you're going to have to find a way to get the data from where it is to the new location. But then once it's in there, what next? The next step might be that you have to figure out how you're going to store the data, how you're going to organize the data, who will have access to the data, how will you manage who has access to certain parts of data that might still be relatively connected. This is thinking. This is not something that the app is going to tell you. This is hidden work that you still have to do to be successful, whether or not you're good or you can easily figure out how to add data. Pasting a code snippet, hey, that's super easy, right? You just pop it in unless you're not in charge of pasting the code snippets. Then you've got a little bit more legwork to take time to write an email, to send an email, figure out the right person to write an email, to ask them to paste the code snippet onto the site. This is a hidden bit of work. Maybe you can invite people by copying a link. Maybe you can, if you're a product champion, you're really excited, you can send people a link and they can see what you're so excited about. But that is nowhere near as difficult as convincing them that they should start using their product, that they should stop working the way they've been working, and that they should adopt this whole new thing that you're dropping in their lap. And then, of course, typing credit card information into a payment has got to be one of the easiest things in the world. You pop in some numbers, but using your personal or your political capital to get access to that credit card information to say, this is something that we need to invest money in, this is something worth our dollars, that's a little bit more tricky. And that's part of hidden work. So why does hidden work matter? Hidden work matters in any kind of product adoption, but it especially matters when you have people who are both either excited or not excited to use your product. We might call them the champions or the antagonists. Champions is a pretty common term. Antagonist is one that I like to use because if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And the antagonist may not be indirectly against using your tool, but they may not be on board. Okay, so your champions and your antagonists come to your tool with a different set of hidden work. They may both have access to the same product, the same interface. Maybe they have their own different areas, but they're using the same set of tools. But your product champion is not dealing with the same problems as your antagonist. Your product champion might be the boss. They might be able to come in and say, this is what we're doing, no matter what. Everyone else get on board. So your antagonist has to figure out how they're going to get on board, how they're going to have to learn a product they really don't want to learn. And then on the flip side, if you are a champion who does not have the authority to start paying for a tool, you come in, you start using it, you get comfortable. How are you going to pitch it to your antagonist who might be your boss? So we want to make sure these two groups receive messaging that helps them with these aspects, not just using the product, not just a simple email that says, hey, by the way, you haven't logged in a couple of days. We can use email to send messages that are really, truly helpful for working through these elements that so many of our customers are struggling with. There are a few other things that you're going to want to know. So these two descriptions here are pretty common for all champions, for all antagonists. Within every product is going to have a little bit of a different setup. So you'll want to know a few things. For starters, what is the functional role? Sometimes we have tools that are used by people who are doing relatively similar work. Maybe you have a team of designers and they want to use a design tool together. Maybe you have a team of accountants and they're all using QuickBooks. Or maybe you have an advertising agency where you have a brand strategist, you have a CEO, you have some clients, you have several different types of people, maybe a developer, an engineer. This is a graphic designer. I couldn't find an emoji for someone who is a designer. Maybe it exists. You're also going to want to understand their organizational status. What kind of power do they hold? What is their job role? Does it have anything to do with, do they have any kind of authority to make this kind of, to spread a tool, to have new people adopt a tool? Another way to think of it is, are they more like Michael Scott or are they more like Pam? Are they someone saying, here's my code, you're just going to have to deal with it. Here's new software, just learn it. Or are they someone who is more likely to be in a position of just having to figure it out? And there's another possibility here. There may be some teams where everyone who uses the tool has a relatively equal status. And then lastly, the payment authority. Who is going to ultimately be the person who says, yes, we can buy this? And that is very important to know when you're sending out your emails, so you can help people who don't have the payment authority get the payment authority. And if you know who's likely to buy, you want to make sure you send your sales enablement messaging to that person. So how do we figure this out? How do we know what is unique to our product champions? How do we know what pains and objections our antagonists, but maybe one day champions, are bringing to the table? I organize a user research insight study for every client that I work with to answer some of these questions. So the way I approach it You don't have to do it this way. There's lots of ways, but I like to approach champions at a few different organizations. These purple people are the champions. You can go into your user analytics tool and you can see who are the people on different accounts who have been with your, who started the account, who maybe their name is on the payment. They're the person who gets the invoices. Who is the person who has that champion status? And then once you've got a few people who have agreed to speak with you, who are champions at different organizations, then I like to talk to other people at those organizations who may be other champions, former antagonists, current antagonists, you never know. The reason that I like to talk to several people within one organization as opposed to one champion here, one antagonist here, and scattered is because you get to ask several people about the same process. One company signed up, one person signed up from one company, and they told someone else, and they told someone else. And what was that process like? What was everyone's perspective on that process? So I've outlined a few questions here for you on questions to ask your champions. When you're talking with your champions, you want to know how many people they talk to, when they talk to people. Did they invite people via text? Did they mention it in a meeting? Were they chatting at a conference when they met someone else from your company and they said, oh, maybe we should try this? What was the moment when people said, yeah, let's try it, let's sign up? And then once they signed up, how did they bring it to somebody else? Meanwhile, ask your antagonist, did they already know about the product when someone told them? Did they already know about the problem? Did they get it? Was the big idea clear? Were there any doubts? What were the doubts? How long before they started to overcome or work through some of the doubts? What was the first moment when they said, hey, you know what? This worked. I have a few interview ops recommendations that I say like to offer you. They work for me. Maybe they'll work for you. The ideal fit criteria is something that I have found to be really helpful. If you talk to people who you assume are behaving the way that you assume is most likely to indicate a successful customer, you may or may not have this data yet. But people who are actively logging in on a regular basis, maybe they have more than a certain number of team members, and reaching out to those organizations specifically. It takes time, absolutely. It takes a lot more time to specifically identify the people that you want to speak with. And then I also recommend writing a custom note to each one. But I have found it generates a far higher response rate than blasting out an email to everyone. You also get really high quality responses. So invite the champions first. And then once you've got your champion on board, then you can talk to some of the other people. And then while all of this is happening, these are links once you check the mural. You can Google them as well. Record your interview in Zoom. You can transcribe it using Rev. There's a few other services that use AI. Rev uses human transcribers, and they're very good. And then I use a tool called NomNoms. It's a great place to just store all of your customer research, all of your transcripts, all of your support chat. You can really get into, you can have a single source of truth for all of your user research and voice of customer data. And if you want more on jobs to be done, the script to kickstart your jobs to be done interviews, I Google it right before I do any interview to refresh my memory and make sure my questions are sharp. Okay, this is great, you may be saying. We have a user interview study. Maybe you even get a journey map out of it, but then what? Then you have what you need to turn what may be mediocre emails, what might be no emails, might be pretty good emails into really awesome emails. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So when you are writing emails, the key here when you have champions and antagonists is personalizing the messaging to help your champions and your antagonists. And this is the chart that I like to bear in mind. Consider whether someone is high status or low status, whether they're a champion or an antagonist. And based on what you know about where they fit in this chart, you may be able to send them different types of resources, content, pre-written notes. So figuring out what it comes down to is figuring out what barriers they have and how you can help them overcome those barriers. With that, we're going to look at a few examples. So I have created a fictional product. It's called Banana Blaster. It is an inventory product for companies, for banana stands to manage their inventory. And this is an email that goes out to new employees who are the champion. And what I know about this tool, reason I built this, again, fictional tool, is to help people who run banana stands to have a much better handle on their inventory. So it goes to high status people, the managers, the boss, someone who's got some kind of authority, not the people counting the bananas. They're not going to use it terribly often in the day-to-day practice of managing inventory. Instead, they will have end users do that and they'll go in and check the numbers. And they have payment authority. This is someone who is going to be responsible for paying for and maintaining this account. How do you write this email? What are the different components of a conversion optimized email? Maybe you've heard this term before, and what does it even mean? So with conversion copywriting, we are all about joining the conversation happening in our readers' heads. And what you might find in a user research study or watching an episode of Arrested Development is that there's a lot of counting troubles and difficulties among people who are working in banana stands. So I've got a subject line here. This is, why can't my employees count? Then you want to continue the messaging you start in your subject line in the body of your email by agitating this pain a little bit. So your email starts off about your customer. It's not about you. It's about your customer and your customer's problem. They come to you because they have trouble managing inventory. They can't necessarily figure out why their employees think a banana equals a buck. And inventory is a mess. And then you can position a feature as a solution to that particular problem. In this case, it's the banana math training area, which gives team members a way to get trained on their own without the boss having to spend a lot of time. So the ability part, the BJ Fogg's behavioral theory, which says you need the motivation, the ability, and the trigger. We've got a little bit of the ability here with showing the screenshots that it's easy to set up, and the motivation, of course. Hey, it's no good when your employees can't do inventory. And we're presenting this as a solution coming through after some action has been completed, and it's nice and triggered. There is a little bit of social proof at the end. Social proof is one of those things that it gets tossed around a lot. It's one of the most commonly understood elements of copywriting. People know it's important. How you use it and how you wield it can make it even more powerful. This testimonial comes from someone who faces similar challenges to the person receiving this email. And then at the end, you've got one single clear call to action. You are not sending social media links. You are not sending 13 different types of features that they could try if they wanted to. You're not sending links to blog articles. You are sending one email with one call to action. Now, here's another email. You may have a high status champion, but you may have a low status champion. This is for another product called Maintenance Sync. It helps people who perform maintenance activities keep track of everything that they're working on. And one of the features is that they can send real-time notifications to people who have joined their product. We start off by saying, hey, you need to get people on board. This subject line here is about the problem of getting people to use your tool. And this could be agitated. I wrote this email, but I would probably try another version, maybe test this against something that's a little bit more painful, a little bit more raw. And the beginning of this email challenges the reader to say, hey, your communication actually matters a lot more than you might think. So your end user might be trying out Maintenance Sync because they're tired of getting phone calls about things that are broken and they need to fix them. But the end user may actually, or their colleagues may be more excited about, hey, just knowing that things have been finished and completed. So there's some copy here that agitates that brings this idea in and then says, we actually have a way to get people on board and a specific feature that you should mention in your first conversation. We're helping somebody who is unlikely to get buy-in on their own if they do nothing. Almost impossible. Maybe they're a little bit more likely if we give them the assistance to focus their conversation on that introduction. And one additional way we do that, so we say, first conversation, talk about this feature. Additionally, here's an email you can copy and paste. So you don't have to even think about writing an email. Here's one right here. And then finally, we have an email from an antagonist. So same product. We have our invitation or suggestion to invite people. Here's an email that might go to someone whose status may or may not be known. Maybe you invite someone really high status at the beginning, maybe not. This person is likely to be an end user, but they're not likely to be in the app managing work orders. They're more likely to be receiving notifications or placing work orders. We let them know what they've been invited to, and we've got a little bit of a radical idea here. This is, you've been invited to stop wondering when the toilet will be fixed. This is a little bit of different subject line than, hey, welcome to this product that someone invited you to. And I would definitely want to test this. I have no idea how it would perform. It would be really cool to try. So you've been invited to join. You may also be wondering, what is this thing? Acknowledging that people may not have a clue what your product is all about is very similar to being in an airport. And when people tell you, hey, there's a delay, it's going to be 30 minutes, here's the reason. It's much better to get that acknowledgement that you may not know what's going on than it is to have someone say nothing. So you're acknowledging the frustration that may be going on in someone's world when they receive an email about a tool they didn't ask to be invited to. So we're telling them what the product is and what they've been invited, why they've been invited in the context of what they care about. So if we know from user research what our antagonists care about, may not be the same as what our champions care about, then we can say, hey, we're going to also introduce this one feature. Now, if I am learning about real-time notifications, if I, as a person who has to complain about things that are broken, that's not the same feature that may be the first one you want to introduce to someone who is your champion. So this is where having that quantitative data on what your champions do when they're successful versus what your antagonists do to become successful can help you even further customize this messaging to know what features and you're going to want to order and plot your sequences. So we give a call, back to the email, we give a call to action to say, hey, just stop wondering when maintenance is done. This may be one of the best offerings that you can give to someone who has to be bought in to start using the product. I have a longer signature here that says who this is the CEO of the product, as again a reminder of who we are and what we're doing. And then a testimonial that again comes from someone who is in a similar position, in a similar point in time to the person receiving this email. So with that, I would like to say thank you for joining this session. We covered a lot. We talked about why onboarding emails matter, how to think about using email as a way to overcome frustration, to work through hidden work, as a way to make sure that we are targeting our champions, our antagonists, how to do a research study, how to turn research into email. Oh my goodness, it was a lot. And there's so much more detail that we can go into. So you can, of course, email me at any time, Allie@allieblum.com. And I've included a link here of a 4-part email course that will have a lot of what we've covered written down, and a link to view this mural if there isn't already one in the email where you have a video recap of this talk. So thank you all so much for listening. I am so excited to see what you do next with your onboarding emails. Good luck. Thank you.